Hey, welcome back to the show. I am so glad you could join me week after week on Monday Morning Mojo, the podcast for all the things that will get you thinking about life and work in different ways. I think that the podcast is for anyone who wants to lead at a higher level and wants to build something meaningful and who is looking to show up with some clarity, intention, and a whole lot of purpose. I'm Anna Gibbs. It's a pleasure to be with you week after week. And whether you're driving to your first appointment, lacing up your sneakers for a morning walk, or sitting with your coffee before the world wakes up, this episode is for you. And I want you to stay with me because today, we are talking about something that every one of us has experienced probably more times than we'd like to admit. And we're talking about networking today. Now, before you might roll your eyes or push the skip button because you think you know everything there could possibly be to know about networking, hear me out. Because I want to have a different conversation today. I'm not going to give you tips on ways to make that networking event 100 times more successful. I'm not going to tell you to work the room or perfect your elevator pitch. And we're certainly not going to talk about how many cards you can hand out before the cocktail hour ends. What I am going to talk about is the version of networking that I believe we all need to embrace in today's world, and a new take on networking that will energize you and not exhaust you. And for most of us, I think it's going to be a conversation that will send us on a new journey and hopefully give us a lot more in terms of tangible results from our time out in what we call networking. So I'm hoping to flip the script a little bit, and I want to talk to you about how we can connect over collect. Because if you're anything like me, I started in business a long time ago. I was very young. I was only 18 when I started, and it was in a very different time in our world. It was in 1989. Oh my goodness. And it was at a time where we didn't have all the technology available to us. We didn't have the social platforms. And so networking was a very big part of how we all grew and expanded our reach. And I think for a lot of us, we made almost a full-time job out of going to networking events. We attended every chamber meeting, every conference. We were looking for all the ways that we could get in front of people. And I really learned a lot about people, and I learned a lot about myself, and I really enjoyed it for so many years. There were times, I'll be honest, when I felt like I couldn't possibly go to one more thing. And there's a lot of things that show up on our calendar. And if we look at it for the sake of networking, it's hard to say no, right? Because we do want to be visible and we want to get out there. But what I want to talk about today is how to make each of those events more meaningful. And if I were to ask you right now, and if you could answer me honestly, do you have a stack of business cards somewhere? I mean, maybe it's tucked in a drawer or in the bottom of one of your bags. Maybe it's sitting over here on the left side of your desk or in the center console of your car. You know what I mean, right? No one else is listening. You can be honest. You know, those cards that you collected at all these events, cards from people you met, people who seemed very interesting, people who represented products and services and businesses that you wanted to learn more about, and you especially wanted to get your card in their hands. And you probably had a good exchange where you even said, hey, let's definitely connect. And then what? Nothing happens. I get it. I see you. I have been you. Here's the thing. We were taught a model of networking that was really a model of collecting. And at a time in our careers or at a time in business when we didn't have other ways to make those connections, it was valuable. And we were there, we showed up, we introduced ourselves, we handed over a card, we got a card, and then we moved on to the next person. And Maybe we don't talk about this enough, so I'm going to pull back the covers on this. And I'm going to tell you that I am not looking to be at less events per se. I love the organizations that I engage with. I find so much value in the chambers that I belong to. I find so much value in other professional organizations that I belong to. But what I am saying is that when we get to the event, what is our goal? Is the goal to just work the room and collect a bunch of cards? Or is the goal to make meaningful connection? Is it to be seen, or is it to be someone that you can really connect with? I think rather than trying to make the rounds, we should be looking at who we could talk to and what conversations we could have that would be really moving the needle and creating some connection. Because the person who talks to the most people isn't always the winner. And I get it. Like I said, when we were starting out in business, that model made a lot of sense. We needed the visibility. We needed to get our name out there. We wanted to be in the room. We wanted to make an impression quickly. A lot of times because we didn't know how long we might hold someone's attention, right? So this is how we learned to network. It was sort of a numbers game. But here's what nobody told us. Volume like that without follow through is just motion. You're just working a room. And it might feel like you're making a lot of progress. It might feel like you are ambitious. And at the end of the night, when you drive home with 20, 30 new cards, it feels exciting. But if the next morning you have no real memory of any single conversation that moved you, if you have to ask yourself, who was this person? What did they tell me? What did we talk about? What did I actually build today? Then we just flooded around the room, but we didn't make a meaningful connection. And so I want to be honest about that. And look, it's not a personal failure. It's just that maybe that model and our strategy around networking needs to change. So if you're tracking with me and you get what I'm saying, then let's talk about a better one. Because this podcast is about, I call it Monday Morning Mojo because I want to give you a dose of thinking, reality, ideas that really will help you to think bigger and to think differently so that you can create better or different results. And so if you have a networking event on your calendar this week, which I bet you do, I want to introduce this idea to you that could genuinely change how you walk into the room and how you attend every professional event from here on out. Because if I could pose this question to you, what if networking wasn't about how many people you met, but about how present you were with the ones you did? What if instead of trying to talk to everyone in the room, you gave yourself permission to find one or two people, maybe 3 or 4 at most, to have a real conversation with? Not a transactional exchange or a sales pitch, right? I'm not talking about giving your elevator speech. I'm talking about a real conversation, the kind where you actually learn something about the person in front of you. The kind where you leave thinking, well, that was interesting and I'd like to learn more. And I know that someone is thinking right now, well, Anna, if I only talk to 1 or 2 people, am I even networking? My answer to that is yes. In fact, I think you're doing it better than almost everyone else in the room because it's about the quality of the conversation over the quantity. Look, here's what I can tell you. I spent many years as a part of a B&I group, which many of you are probably in B&I now. It's an internationally known group that was built for business people to make real connections. Week after week, you attend meetings together and you get to know each other. And one of the things that I always appreciated about B&I, so a shout out to all the people in B&I, is that you're taught something called giver's gain. In other words, you're taught that if you want to grow your business, the way you will do that is by taking a step back and really focusing on someone else's business first. And as you get to know the people in the room and you get to know what they do, that you will be in a better position to help connect them or refer them to the clients and the people they want to do business with. And the way that you do that is that it's not just because you're at a meeting together once a week for 45 minutes or an hour. It's because what they teach you at BNI is to set up these one-to-ones where you can now sit down together and over coffee or whatever, and in 30 minutes or however long you're going to meet, you really have a more in-depth conversation and learn something about the other person. You learn something about their business, their goals, their ideal client referral, their opportunities. And in doing that, you are now clearly able to understand how to refer someone to them. And I love that. I love that whole concept. And you can build that into your own business strategy every week and month over month. So when you're at a networking event, I feel that if we could have a quality conversation that leads to that coffee date or lunch date where you can now sit down and get to know each other and your business is better, I feel like that's going to bring so much more value than just having a stack of business cards on your desk that sure you can put into your database. But if there was no real connection, if there was no meaningful conversation, then when your email comes across their inbox, it may not land. It may not land the way you hope it will, because if the conversation they had with you wasn't memorable, if it was just transactional, then you're not really networking, you're just collecting cards. So I want to turn this around and tell you that the goal might be to narrow your focus. And I find that every time I narrow my focus, I get bigger results. And I get it. It's a little counterintuitive because I think we all think that it's about more being better, but I feel it's really about the focus. I'll tell you, recently I went to Cabo. I was invited to attend a women's retreat with Go Abundance Women. It was phenomenal. And by all intents and purposes, it was a small group. There was about 50 people, maybe 60 at most, that were in attendance. And compared to other conferences I've gone to where there were thousands of people and other events where there were hundreds of people in the room, this was small by that definition. And it's interesting because I was only going to know two people in the room, one of which I had only met on Zoom before. And on the flight over to Mexico, I was thinking about what my expectations were, and I decided to have none. I decided that I was going to go to that event open-minded with no real expectations, and I was going to just take it all in. I was going to learn from the speakers. I was going to learn from people around me. I was going to connect and have some really intentional conversations. And I did not put a number on how many people I wanted to meet. I did not put a number on how many people I wanted to get a consultation with. It was nothing like that. It was not transactional. It was an opportunity for me to expand my network and to really have these purposeful conversations. And I will tell you that out of that group of nearly 60 women, I probably only had conversations with a handful of them. I had some meaningful conversations and spent some real time with about 5 or 6 women. So at the end of the day, while there were so many other fabulous women I didn't get a chance to talk to, the synergy was there. We had an incredible experience. But those 5 or 6 women that I made contact with, exciting things have been happening already in the last couple of weeks. I've had some one-to-one Zoom calls with them because, we're from all over the country. And I have helped one of those women in particular make a contact that is going to further her career that I'm very excited about it. And another woman in that group has done the same for me. She's actually helped me make contact with 2 other women that I believe is going to lead to some real business opportunities and speaking engagements. And that to me is so exciting. And that is really the point I'm making, is that rather than trying to say hello to 24 people, what if you were to just have real conversations where you actually learn something from each other, you get to know each other, want to set up more conversations later, and that leads to real business opportunities or investment opportunities or maybe even a friendship. That's what can happen when you slow down and go deeper with one person rather than just skimming the surface over and over again. I think the shift that occurs is that you are creating memorable conversations that go way beyond what an elevator pitch can do for any of us. And I think there's that saying that people will not remember what you say, but they will remember how you made them feel. I love that phrase because I think that it teaches us to be curious instead of impressive. Yeah, be curious instead of impressive. Again, when I was in my younger years and beginning in my career, maybe I didn't realize it, but now looking back, I see how I was focused on impressing people. And look, that's a natural human behavior. I think most of us walk into a networking event trying to present our best self. And we want people to know what we do. We want to, convey that we're good at what we do. We want to convey in some way that they should want to work with us, right? But if you really break it down, that's a lot to try to convey to a room full of people. And I think that while it's understandable and we're proud of what we've built, we don't want to walk in with this energy that is saying, hey, let me tell you all about me. Because even though that may not be your intent, right? You are walking in because you want to make a good impression, but yet you are trying to be impressive. And that energy, people feel that. And I think it honestly works against us. I think it creates a distance rather than a connection. Yet curiosity does the opposite. If you walk into a room genuinely interested in the people around you, and when you ask questions that go beyond what do you do and actually invite someone to share what they're excited about, what they're building, what's lighting them up right now, people open up in a way that small talk just never creates. So, at your next event, I want you to try this. I'm going to challenge you to shift on your normal networking strategy. I want you to be excited when you walk in and curious. And instead of asking someone, hey, what do you do? Try asking them this question. What are you building in this season of your life or career? Or maybe you want to ask, what's bringing you joy lately? Or what's a conversation you've been wanting to have more of? Now, look, I know that these questions are different than everyone is expecting, and you just have to go with it. And you might have someone be a little surprised because every one of us is programmed to say, what do you do? And every one of us is programmed to expect to hear, what do you do? And we have this, rehearsed response. So your questions are fresh. Your questions are different. Your questions are intriguing and they're unexpected. So just realize that when you do put it out there, you might have someone pause for a minute. You might have them take a minute to think about what you just said, and that's okay. Watch what happens. Watch how their face changes, though. Watch them lean into you because you just told them without saying a word that you're actually interested in them, not in their title, not in their company first, but in them. And that's the beginning of real connection. I think that's going to start a conversation that both of you are going to be excited to dig into. That's where it all starts. So now you've had a great conversation. You're meeting someone very interesting. You feel a little spark of this genuine connection. And there's that moment where you both kind of look at each other and you think, hey, I'd like to learn more about you and your business or whatever it is that you do. So you want to take the opportunity to follow up because it's very hard. I think we all agree that it's very hard to set an appointment or to schedule coffee right there. Maybe some of us have been successful at that once in a while, but I don't know if it's really the goal at that moment. But after the event is over and we are going back to our cars and back to our lives, we want to take a moment, maybe that evening or the next morning, and follow up, right? Because if you think about the event you just attended, there was this door that opened up, and follow up is now how you walk through it. And I think that's the other challenge with the way we've been networking is we open up doors or we knock on doors and then we don't follow through and we don't actually walk through the door. So I think that this will give you the opportunity now to take some of those meaningful conversations and take it a step further. And look, I have made some amazing friends through business. I have some of my closest friends started out as business colleagues, and I've met them at, events like what we're describing here. And that can really be something special that is unexpected, but that can happen. But then there are lots of great business opportunities that have grown from these conversations and other things too. So I like to follow up with a text, maybe an email, whatever you're comfortable with. And I try to do it, within a short period of time. If it feels appropriate to do it that evening, okay. But most of the time, I wait till the next morning. And it's simple. I might just send a text that says something like, hey, I really enjoyed meeting you last night or yesterday. I would love to schedule some time for us to grab coffee and to learn a little bit more about what we each do. Or if you want to invite them to lunch, whatever feels right to you. But I think it's these coffee dates that the magic really happens. And if you think about the purpose of going to a networking event, it should be to schedule 2 of these coffee dates, not to have 27 cards on my desk. And so when you get to have those meetings and you get to know each other, there's now this intention, there's this purposeful conversation. You're not in a crowded room where you can't hear what everyone's saying. There's background music. Maybe you're trying to juggle a drink or a plate of food. And, that's just never going to be conducive to having a meaningful conversation. So at these, coffee dates, that is where you can really dig in. And that's it. It's simple. I think, I don't know, it's 7 or 8 words. Hey, I'd love to learn more about what you're doing. And would you like to grab coffee? That's it. And that's where it happens. It's over the coffee where you build the relationships. And truly, that's where the real ROI is going to come in. It's not in the stack of cards, it's in the depth of the relationships. And I just want to tell you something that I think surprises people when I do say it out loud. The relationships that I have had that have had the greatest impact on my life, both personally and professionally, were almost the ones I never expected, right? It was the ones that came from those coffee dates. When I met someone at a chamber event, or I walked away from some breakfast, or when I had lunch with a woman I connected with at a conference. And that resulted in me gaining a mentor that I didn't even know I needed, but I did. I mean, I've met some amazing people over the years at networking events who I have called upon. I've used their services when I needed it most, and that was invaluable. But when you can also see that you become friends in the process, or these solid referral partners, that's life-changing. And I've seen connections grow into investment partnerships and collaborations and opportunities that I think would never have shown up in any other way. Maybe even opportunities I couldn't have planned for. They weren't even a part of my strategic plan or business plan, but they came from that place of genuine connection. It came from the relationship that grew out of the connection, not just some strategy. So, that's another thing about this whole conversation is that sometimes you simply can't predict what a relationship will become when you give it room to grow. And here's the other thing I know for sure. It never grows if you don't follow up. So let's just make this really practical for you as we finish up today. I will say that after every event you attend, whether it's a chamber meeting, a conference, networking, breakfast, whatever, identify at least one person you want to have a deeper connection with. Maybe you just start out with one, and that's okay. Because if you could schedule a coffee or a lunch with one person within 24 hours and you have that genuine connection, you don't know what could result from that. I mean, it could be endless amounts of business opportunities. It could be a ripple effect because that person might connect you to another person and another person. And I can't tell you the countless number of things that have really opened doors for me in my career and opportunities that I can trace back through a series of people. I can trace back to that one person, that if I hadn't done the follow up, if I hadn't had the real connection, that none of that would have happened. And going back to what I said earlier about givers gain, remember that that's really key too. That I just want to put a little bit more spotlight on that and have that mindset that I think this mindset is what separates a lot of us from others who are just out there trying to be seen. I think that when you want to seek out other professionals and build a community of professionals, that it comes down to that focus of give first. When you walk into a networking event, thinking about what you're going to get, thinking about leads, referrals, visibility, clients, right? I think we're operating from scarcity. Even if we're not aware of it, I think people will feel it. There's that subtle transactional energy that shows up in how you engage. And it's not that anyone's going to walk away from that conversation with you and think poorly of you, but they're also not going to feel the real you. And I think that when you show up authentically and you show up wanting to learn about someone else's business first, and you're thinking about how you could give to them, how I could introduce them to someone else, or how I might be able to help them somehow, or is there a connection I can make for them in the room, or somewhere in my own bigger network, everything shifts. And truly, that's how you become the person everybody wants to be around. When you become someone that people think of when an opportunity comes up, because you become that person who is thinking of others first. And that's how your name gets mentioned in rooms that you're not even in. And so that, my friend, is the most powerful marketing you could ever do. So I did learn this principle early enough in my career, and it really has served me. When I walked away from that energy of just working the room and got very present and connected to wanting to make meaningful conversations happen, that's when things really changed for me. And, as a leader, a coach, a business owner, and a community member, I want people to know I'm here to show up for not just my own reasons, but really for me to contribute and give back. That's really important for me. And so I hope you found this conversation inspiring. None of this is complicated. It's really very simple. It's just having a different perspective and walking into the next event with a little different energy and probably very different questions, right, to carry into the room. Like I said, instead of thinking about what you can get from the event, ask yourself who you can serve today. Maybe it's making an introduction between two people would benefit from knowing each other. I mean, I do that all the time. And I love connecting people. I think that's one of my values, but I think it's also one of my superpowers. I believe I'm a connector, and I like being able to make things happen for people. I like to be able to share resources or ideas I think might be valuable to you. And I believe that comes back to me at some point too. And I have no expectation about it coming back, but it always does. And so I think that when you become that person who asks a thoughtful question that opens a real conversation in a room instead of the small talk, magical things can happen. And I think when we lead with generosity and let go of the outcome, magic happens too. So that's where I found really true connection over and over again. I feel like it has made networking more fun. Because listen, we've all been there where we feel like, oh my gosh, I couldn't possibly go to one more event, even though we go. I think this is a fresh approach that can actually make it more fun and energetic. And I think that can change the way that we really attract people into our space. So, all right, as we land the plane here, I want to leave you with something that you can actually use. And I want you to think about how you're going to walk into the room the next time you have an event, whether it's today, this week, next month, whatever it is. Just carry this with you. When you arrive, resist the urge to work the room. Just take a deep breath, look around the room, and ask yourself, who in this space do I want to actually get to know? Maybe it's just one person. Maybe it's two or three. I would really encourage you to keep the number small so that you can have those conversations that go a little bit deeper than surface level. And I don't want you to think about who can help you the most. I don't want you to think about who has the biggest network or who you find genuinely interesting. I want you to find one or two of those people that you can just go have a real conversation with. And for you to be comfortable enough to ask the kinds of questions that invite someone to share what's actually going on in their world and what is making them feel alive, right? So again, I gave you some questions earlier. We'll put all the questions in the show notes, but asking them what they're excited about, what they're building, what's bringing them joy, maybe even what challenge they're navigating at the moment, right? Those are questions that evoke a very different type of dialogue. And I think that you will find that the curiosity grows from those conversations. And the other thing that I want to make sure you're mindful of is that you want to listen more than you speak. Because remember, the goal is curiosity, not impressing, right? So if you're going to be curious instead of impressive, then you want to stay focused on what they have to tell you. And when the conversation does end or wind down, you should both feel kind of that spark that says, hey, I would love to spend more time with this person. I would love to follow up and really get to know them better. And that's when you want to follow up the next day with that message to make an invitation to join you for coffee or whatever feels right. And again, that's where the real magic happens. So, one last thing before I let you go is this question I want you to sit with today. Who is one person, someone you've met, someone you've been meaning to reach out to, someone you connected with at an event recently that you didn't follow up with, but they deserve a message from you right now? Because here's what I want you to know. It's never too late to send a message that could be very simple and sound something like this. Hey, it was great meeting you at the chamber breakfast last week. And I wanted to know if we could schedule some time to have a cup of coffee and get to know each other a little better. It's no different than sending that message the next morning. So if there is someone that is memorable, someone that comes to mind, and you haven't done the follow-up, it's not too late. Do it right now. Do it today. Send it to one person. You already know who it is. You've already got someone in mind. I'd be willing to bet you can name them at this very moment and send them that text, and you'll see that you'll have a coffee date on your calendar. And it's never too late to do that kind of follow-up or reach out. So do that. Keep it simple, keep it genuine, see what happens. Because remember, the goal here is connection. It's not collecting people, it's not collecting cards, it's connecting, and it's about valuing people. And I think when we lead with that, really lead with that, the relationships that come into your life will surprise you in the most beautiful ways. So that's your mojo for this week. Go out there and make it meaningful. Go out there and reach out to someone. And I can't wait to hear how things start changing in your world and theirs. Thanks for tuning in every week. If you found value in this, I want you to share this episode right now with someone else who's out there networking with you and give them an opportunity to think about how they want to show up differently in the room too. All right, everyone, have a great day. I will talk with you in the next episode. Bye-bye.